Fort Bragg, North Carolina. August 1972, 5:40 a.m. Before sunrise, the military training grounds were already alive. Cold air drifted across the obstacle course as hundreds of elite soldiers stood in perfect formation, waiting for the day's final combat demonstration. Nobody spoke. Even the instructors remained unusually quiet. Because today was not an ordinary training exercise, today belonged to one man. His name was Colonel Victor Dragan. Across military circles, his reputation had become almost mythical. For nearly 16 years, he had traveled between elite military academies around the world, defeating decorated hand-to-hand combat instructors, commandos, heavyweight champions, and survival experts in controlled combat demonstrations. His official military record remained classified. His combat record did not. 51 victories, no defeats, no draws. To many soldiers, Victor Dragan wasn't simply the strongest military fighter alive. He was proof that discipline, strength, and relentless training could overcome any opponent. At exactly 5:45 a.m., a black military vehicle stopped beside the training field. The door opened. Every conversation ended. A man, nearly 6 feet 5 inches tall, stepped onto the gravel. He wore a plain, dark green military uniform without decorations. He didn't need medals. His reputation arrived before he did. His boots struck the ground with slow, measured confidence. Each step echoed through the silent field. His shoulders were broad enough to make the surrounding officers seem smaller. His hands looked carved from stone. Years of battlefield conditioning had left almost no unnecessary movement in his body. Everything about him suggested control, absolute control. He stopped in front of the assembled soldiers. Without raising his voice, he spoke. "Today, you will learn the difference between fighting and surviving." The demonstration began immediately, one after another. 8 military instructors entered the combat circle. Every one of them was highly trained. Everyone carried years of experience. None lasted longer than 30 seconds. Victor never appeared angry. He never celebrated. He never taunted anyone. He simply solved every opponent like a problem that had already been answered. The soldiers watched in complete silence. Some had expected violence. Instead, they witnessed precision. Every movement ended exactly where it needed to. Nothing was wasted. Nothing looked dramatic. Yet every opponent ended up on the ground. After the 8th instructor failed, nobody volunteered again. Not because they lacked courage, because they understood something. Sometimes courage and victory are two completely different things. The commanding general slowly stepped forward. He looked toward the thousands of soldiers gathered around the field. Then he asked a simple question. Does anyone here believe Colonel Dragan can still be challenged? Silence. Not one hand moved. Not one voice answered. The general nodded slowly. That is what I expected. But among the reporters invited to witness the demonstration, one journalist quietly raised his hand. The general looked at him. "You have something to say?" The reporter hesitated. Then he spoke. "There is one name?" The field remained silent. The general folded his arms. "What name?" The reporter swallowed once. "Bruce Lee." Several officers exchanged brief glances. Some smiled, others quietly shook their heads. One captain laughed under his breath. "The actor," another officer whispered. The journalist remained calm. "Not the actor. The martial artist. I've interviewed fighters across America. Whenever people discuss impossible skill, they mention one man, Bruce Lee." For the first time that morning, Colonel Victor Dragan turned his head. He looked directly at the reporter, not with anger, with curiosity, real curiosity. "What did you say his name was?" "Bruce Lee." The field remained completely still. Dragan stared at the reporter for several seconds. Then he asked another question. Has he ever fought professionally? No. Military background? No. Heavyweight champion? No. International combat record? No. Dragan slowly nodded. I see. He looked away. For a moment everyone believed the conversation had ended. Then he spoke again, calmly, almost politely. If this Bruce Lee is truly the man people believe him to be, I'll tell him to meet me. Several reporters immediately looked up. Pens stopped moving. Cameras focused. The air itself seemed heavier. Dragan continued, I have fought soldiers. I have fought champions. I have fought men who believed strength alone could save them. I have fought men who believed speed alone could save them. They all discovered the same truth. No technique survives overwhelming force. He paused, then looked directly into the television cameras. If Bruce Lee wishes to prove otherwise, I will be waiting. No shouting, no insults, no dramatic threats, just certainty. The interview ended, but before noon, every major newspaper in America had already received the headline, "The world's deadliest military champion challenges Bruce Lee." By sunset, radio stations were discussing it. Sports writers argued about it. Martial arts schools debated it. Military veterans dismissed it. Hollywood couldn't stop talking about it. Within 48 hours, one question had spread across the country. Could technique defeat military power? Or had Bruce Lee finally found an opponent even he couldn't overcome? 3 days later, nearly 3,000 miles away, inside a quiet private training hall in California, Bruce Lee had not spoken a single word about the challenge, not one. He continued training exactly as he always had, as though the world outside no longer existed. Until one folded newspaper quietly appeared beside him, and the headline waiting on its front page would change everything. The city had only just begun to wake. Outside, the streets were quiet. Inside a modest private training hall, every movement had a purpose. There was no music, no audience, no cameras, only the rhythmic sound of bare feet touching the wooden floor. Bruce Lee trained alone. His movements were neither fast nor slow. They were exact. Every step stopped at precisely the right moment. Every strike returned to guard without wasting a fraction of energy. To an ordinary observer, it looked almost effortless. To a trained martial artist, it was terrifying, because true mastery never needed to appear violent. It only needed to be inevitable. Near the entrance stood 3 of Bruce's students, none of them interrupted. Over the years, they had learned an important lesson. When Bruce trained in complete silence, he wasn't practicing techniques. He was refining principles. Minutes passed, then the front door opened quietly. A young assistant entered, carrying several newspapers gathered from different cities across America. He hesitated. Every front page carried the same headline. "The deadliest military champion challenges Bruce Lee." He waited. Bruce completed his final movement before slowly turning around. Without speaking, the assistant offered him the newspapers. Bruce accepted them calmly. He read each article from beginning to end. One newspaper described Colonel Victor Dragan as the greatest military fighter alive. Another claimed no civilian martial artist could survive against him. A third newspaper had already predicted the outcome. Bruce Lee's speed won't matter against military power. Bruce folded every newspaper neatly. He placed them on a wooden bench. Then he returned to the center of the room. He continued training. Not one question, not one reaction. His students exchanged confused looks. Finally, one of them gathered enough courage to speak. Going to answer his challenge?" Bruce stopped. For several seconds, he simply looked through the large window toward the morning sky. Then he quietly asked, "Have you ever watched water?" The students looked at each other. None understood. Bruce smiled faintly. "Water never argues with a mountain. It simply finds another way." The room became silent again. Another student spoke. "But people across America are saying he's unbeatable." Bruce looked at him. "Every person is unbeatable, until someone understands them." No one replied. An hour later, Bruce left the gym. He drove alone. No interviews, no reporters, no public statement. But outside, the world had already made its decision. Television stations replayed Colonel Dragon's challenge every hour. Sports commentators debated whether Bruce Lee was making the biggest mistake of his life. Military veterans insisted discipline and battlefield experience could never be defeated by traditional martial arts. Across the country, millions waited. Would Bruce Lee respond, or would he remain silent? 2 days later, the answer finally came. Not during a press conference, not through television, not inside a crowded arena. Bruce Lee simply handed a single handwritten note to a journalist waiting outside his training hall. The note contained only one sentence. "Tell Colonel Dragon, I'll meet him." Nothing else. No insults, no promises, no predictions. Within hours, that single sentence became the biggest headline in America. The challenge was no longer a rumor, it was real. Promoters immediately began searching for a venue large enough to hold the event. Every available arena was considered. Phone lines remained busy day and night. Ticket requests arrived faster than they could be counted. And as excitement spread across the country, Colonel Victor Dragon received Bruce Lee's message. He read it once, folded the paper, looked at the officer standing beside him, then quietly said, "Good. For the first time in many years, I may finally meet someone worth remembering." He turned toward the military training field. Behind him, dozens of elite soldiers waited for another demonstration. But this time, Colonel Dragon wasn't thinking about training. For the first time in years, he was thinking about one man, Bruce Lee, and neither of them realized that before they ever stepped into the same ring, someone else had already begun planning how to make this the biggest combat event the world had ever seen. The morning after Bruce Lee's answer became public, America woke up to only one story. Newspapers sold out before breakfast. Radio stations interrupted their regular programming. Television anchors repeated the same question every hour. Can Bruce Lee really defeat the world's deadliest military champion? The debate spread faster than anyone expected. Inside boxing gyms, the answer seemed obvious. Heavyweight fighters laughed at the comparison. A military champion weighs nearly twice as much. One clean punch ends the fight. Across military bases, soldiers respected Bruce Lee's skill. But respect wasn't the same as belief. Many quietly admitted that technique alone had never stopped overwhelming force. Yet in martial arts schools across California, the conversation sounded completely different. Students didn't talk about strength. They talked about timing, distance, control, precision. Their instructors reminded them of something Bruce Lee often taught. The strongest wall always has a weak point. No one knew which side was right, but everyone wanted to witness the answer. Within 72 hours, promoters announced the venue, a historic outdoor stadium in Los Angeles, capacity 45,000 spectators. Every major newspaper printed the announcement across its front page. Ticket offices opened at exactly 9 o'clock Monday morning. Before 9:15, every seat had already been claimed. Hotels around the stadium filled almost immediately. Restaurants hired extra staff. Television networks competed for broadcasting rights. Some journalists called it the combat event of the decade. Others called it the fight that never should have happened. Meanwhile, Colonel Victor Dragan ignored every headline. His daily routine never changed. He woke before sunrise, ran 5 miles without stopping, completed military conditioning, practiced close-quarter combat until sunset. One afternoon, an officer entered the training hall carrying a folder. "Sir, the media wants another interview." Dragan didn't stop training. "No." "They're offering a substantial appearance fee." "No." "They say millions are waiting for your prediction." Only then did Dragan stop. He looked at the officer. "My prediction will happen inside the ring." He returned to training. The interview was cancelled across the country. Bruce Lee received the same requests. Television appearances, magazine covers, radio interviews. Every one of them received the same answer. No comment. Instead, Bruce disappeared from public view. Even many of his closest students saw him less often. The gym lights remained on long after midnight. Some mornings, they found Bruce practicing nothing but footwork. For hours, no punches, no kicks, only movement. One student finally asked, "Why are we practicing movement instead of attacking?" Bruce looked down at the wooden floor, then smiled. "The feet decide the fight. Long before the hands arrive." The student never forgot those words. As the event drew closer, speculation became louder. Experts compared height, weight, reach, military experience, reaction speed. Everyone searched for an advantage. Everyone, except Bruce Lee. Late one evening, after another exhausting training session, Bruce stood alone inside the empty gym. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room was silent. He closed his eyes, not to imagine victory, not to imagine defeat, but to remove both from his mind, because fear and confidence could distract a fighter equally. At that same moment, thousands of miles away, Colonel Dragan stood alone inside a dark military training hall. He stared at a heavy punching bag suspended from the ceiling. Without warning, he struck it once. The chain snapped instantly. The bag crashed onto the concrete floor. The soldiers watching from the doorway said nothing. For years, they had believed no civilian alive could challenge their commander. But now, for reasons they couldn't explain, they were beginning to wonder. Not because Colonel Dragan looked weaker, but because Bruce Lee looked completely unafraid. Sometimes confidence is loud, real confidence, and was perfectly silent. 7 days remained, and somewhere beyond the excitement, beyond the headlines, beyond the roaring crowds that were already preparing for history, 2 men continued training. Neither hated the other. Neither wanted revenge. Both wanted the same thing, the truth. And in 7 days, 45,000 people would discover whose truth was stronger. Long before the gates opened, people were already waiting. Some had driven through the night, others had flown in from different states. Military veterans stood beside college students. Professional fighters stood beside ordinary families. Everyone carried the same ticket. Everyone came searching for the same answer. Could Bruce Lee truly overcome a man built for war? By noon, the lines outside the stadium stretched for blocks. Street vendors sold food and newspapers. Television crews adjusted cameras. Helicopters circled high above the city. The atmosphere felt less like a sporting event, and more like history preparing to introduce itself. Inside, workers made their final inspections. The ring stood alone beneath the afternoon sun. Bright white canvas, blue corner, red corner. Everything else seemed to disappear around it. 1 ring, 2 men, 1 question. At 1:45 p.m., the stadium gates finally opened. Within minutes, Thousands of spectators poured inside. The sound grew steadily louder. Every section filled faster than anyone expected. By 2:30, every one of the 45,000 seats was occupied. Yet no one seemed interested in talking anymore. They simply watched. They waited because they knew. The next few hours would become stories they would tell for the rest of their lives. Backstage, Colonel Victor Dragan sat alone on a wooden bench. His gloves rested beside him. His breathing remained slow. An officer entered quietly. "The stadium is full," Dragan nodded. "The television audience is expected to break records." No response. "The reporters want one final statement." Dragan looked at the officer. "I've already spoken." The officer understood. He left without another word. Several corridors away, Bruce Lee stood inside a much smaller preparation room. No large team, no crowd, only a towel, a bottle of water, and complete silence. One of his students looked nervous. "Master Lee?" "They say everyone expects a knockout." Bruce smiled gently. "They're free to expect whatever they wish." The student hesitated. "Aren't you nervous?" Bruce picked up a small cup of water. He held it still. The surface remained perfectly calm. Then he handed it to the student. "When the water is still, it reflects everything clearly. If you shake it, you see nothing." The student lowered his eyes. He finally understood. Outside, the announcer stepped into the center of the ring. His voice echoed across the stadium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for witnessing today's historic event." The crowd erupted. Flags waved. Camera flashes lit the arena. The noise continued for nearly a full minute. Then it stopped almost instantly. A black vehicle had just arrived beneath the North Tunnel. The doors opened. Colonel Victor Dragan stepped out. Tall, calm, expressionless. He walked toward the entrance without looking left or right. Thousands of voices exploded into cheers. Some applauded, some booed, most simply stared. He climbed the ring steps with the confidence of a man who had never questioned his destination. He entered the ring, looked once across the empty opposite corner, then quietly folded his arms. He waited. 5 minutes passed, then another vehicle appeared beneath the South Tunnel. No security convoy, no celebration. Bruce Lee stepped out alone, wearing simple black training clothes. His pace never changed. He didn't acknowledge the cameras. He didn't acknowledge the crowd. Every step looked identical to the last. Steady, controlled, purposeful. As he emerged into the sunlight, the stadium became strangely quiet. Even those who doubted him wanted to see what would happen next. Bruce climbed into the ring. For the first time that afternoon, the two men stood facing each other. Neither spoke, neither moved. 45,000 spectators watched in complete silence. The referee walked slowly toward the center. He looked first at Colonel Dragan, then at Bruce Lee. He raised one hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for is about to begin." The referee stepped into the center of the ring. 45,000 voices slowly faded. Even the television commentators lowered their voices. Some moments deserved silence. This was one of them. Bruce Lee and Colonel Victor Dragan walked toward the center from opposite corners. Neither looked at the crowd. Neither acknowledged the cameras. The only sound inside the stadium was the soft rhythm of their footsteps across the canvas. When they stopped, they stood less than 3 feet apart. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. The referee began explaining the rules. His words echoed through the stadium. "No strikes after my command. Protect yourselves at all times. If I stop the contest, you stop immediately." Both men nodded, nothing more. The referee looked from one fighter to the other. He expected tension. He expected anger. Instead, he found complete calm. As they turned toward their corners, something unexpected happened. Colonel Dragon spoke quietly. His voice was low enough that only Bruce could hear. "I've studied every style they say you've mastered." Bruce looked at him. Dragon continued, "They all have limits." Bruce answered with the same calm expression. "So do people." Neither smiled, neither reacted, but the exchange stayed with them both. Back in the blue corner, Dragon rolled his shoulders once. His chief instructor leaned close. "He's smaller than we expected." Dragon never looked away from Bruce. "Size has never decided a fight." The instructor frowned. It was the first time he had ever heard his commander admit even that much. Across the ring, one of Bruce's students adjusted his gloves. "Master Lee, the entire world is watching." Bruce nodded slightly. "No, the world is watching itself." The student didn't understand. Bruce offered no explanation. High above the ring, a television camera slowly swept across the audience. Former champions, military officers, martial arts teachers, Hollywood actors, journalists from around the world. Each carried a different prediction. Each believed they understood what was about to happen. None of them did. Without warning, the stadium lights flickered once. A brief power fluctuation, only a second. Yet the sudden darkness drew a collective breath from the crowd. When the lights returned, nothing had changed. Both fighters stood exactly where they had been, completely still. The moment somehow felt even heavier. The announcer's voice returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, this contest will begin shortly." A wave of applause rolled through the stadium, then faded again. Bruce closed his eyes for a single breath. Not to escape the noise, but to hear beyond it. Dragon tightened his gloves. He wasn't thinking about victory. He was thinking about the first exchange, because every battle revealed its truth in the opening seconds. The referee stepped backward. He raised one hand. The timekeeper reached toward the bell. 45,000 people leaned forward almost together. The air itself seemed to stop moving. Somewhere in the front row, a young boy whispered to his father, "Who do you think will win?" His father never answered. He couldn't. For the first time all day, he wasn't sure. The bell hammer began to move, and in the instant before metal touched metal, both fighters made the smallest adjustment of their feet. A movement so subtle that almost no one noticed. But years later, those who studied the footage would say that the fight had truly begun before the bell ever rang. The bell rang, not loudly, not dramatically, just one clear note that seemed to disappear beneath the weight of 45,000 waiting hearts. No one moved. 1 second, 2. Neither man rushed forward. Colonel Victor Dragon stood tall, measuring distance with the patience of a battlefield commander. Across the ring, Bruce Lee remained light on his feet, relaxed, balanced, watching. The crowd expected an explosion. Instead, they witnessed silence. Dragon took the first step, not an attack. A test. Bruce answered with a small shift to his right. Nothing more. The distance between them remained almost unchanged. From the commentary table, one analyst whispered, "Neither of them wants to reveal their plan." Dragon edged closer. His shoulders never tensed. His breathing never changed. Suddenly, his left hand shot forward, not as a knockout punch, as a rangefinder. Bruce tilted his head just enough for the strike to pass harmlessly by. The audience gasped. It was the first real movement of the contest. Dragon didn't chase. He withdrew immediately. His eyes narrowed. His timing, he thought, better than I expected. Bruce said nothing. He simply circled half a step and reset his stance. Another exchange. This time, Dragon attacked with a quick combination, forcing Bruce toward the ropes. Bruce didn't retreat in a straight line. He slipped to an angle, letting the final strike cut through empty air. The crowd erupted, not because someone had fallen, because they had finally seen the difference in their approaches, power against precision. Dragon smiled for the first time. A small smile, the smile of a man who had finally found a genuine challenge. "Good," he said quietly. Bruce answered with a respectful nod. The next moment changed the atmosphere. Bruce stepped in, not to finish the fight, only to test Dragon's reactions. A quick jab, a low feint, a sharp body tap with the lead hand. 3 movements, less than 2 seconds, none intended to cause damage, all intended to collect information. Dragon blocked the first, ignored the second, caught the third on his forearm. Both men separated again. From the stands, it looked like almost nothing had happened. To experienced fighters, everything had happened. Each now understood something important about the other. Dragon possessed remarkable discipline. Bruce possessed remarkable timing. The referee watched carefully. No warnings, no fouls, only clean, controlled combat. Minutes seemed to slow. The stadium had become strangely quiet once more. People weren't cheering anymore. They were studying every step, every breath, every decision. Because they realized they were watching 2 masters trying to solve a problem that neither had faced before. Then, for the first time in the contest, Dragon committed fully. His weight shifted forward, his right shoulder turned. The strike came with extraordinary speed for a man of his size. Bruce moved, but not away, toward the opening. The crowd rose to its feet. The distance vanished in an instant, and just before either man could land the decisive exchange, the chapter of the fight everyone had been waiting for began. The instant Bruce Lee stepped inside, Colonel Victor Dragon unleashed the fastest combination he had thrown all afternoon. A straight right, a left hook, a driving step forward. The audience rose to its feet. Bruce slipped beneath the first strike, turned past the second, but instead of counter-attacking, he retreated. Only 2 steps, just enough to reset the distance. The crowd seemed confused. Many had expected Bruce to answer immediately. He didn't. Across the ring, Dragon lowered his hands only slightly. For the first time that day, he realized Bruce wasn't trying to win exchanges. He was gathering information, every movement, every reaction, every habit. Bruce had been reading him since the opening bell. Dragon adjusted his stance, no longer the aggressive military advance. Now, he waited. The atmosphere changed instantly. 2 masters, both adapting, neither willing to repeat the same mistake. Nearly a minute passed with only brief exchanges, a jab, a blocked kick, a glancing strike to the shoulder. Nothing decisive. Yet the tension inside the stadium became almost unbearable. Then Bruce noticed something. Whenever Dragon committed to his right hand, his lead foot landed a fraction too heavily. It wasn't a flaw most people could see. It lasted less than a heartbeat, but it was enough. Bruce smiled almost imperceptibly. Not because he had found weakness, because he had found rhythm. Across the ring, Dragon saw the smile. He frowned. What did he discover? The answer came seconds later. Dragon surged forward with another powerful attack. Bruce didn't meet force with force. He changed the angle. 1 step outside, a quick pivot, a precise counter to the chest that stopped Dragon's forward momentum. Not enough to knock him down, enough to make him pause. The stadium erupted. For the first time, the military champion had been forced backward, only half a step, but everyone saw it. Dragon looked at Bruce with a new expression, not frustration, respect. "You planned that," he said quietly. Bruce nodded. "I waited for it." The referee watched carefully as both men separated once more. Neither fighter looked tired, But both now understood something important. The fight would not be decided by strength, nor by speed alone. It would be decided by who adapted first. 45,000 spectators stood in complete silence. No chants, no applause, just expectation, because everyone could feel it. The decisive moment was approaching. Bruce slowly settled into his stance. Dragon raised his guard. Neither blinked, neither spoke. The distance between them closed once again. And this time, both men knew the next exchange would decide everything. The stadium held its breath. Bruce Lee and Colonel Victor Dragon stood only a few feet apart. No movement, no noise. Only the quiet rhythm of two men who understood that one final exchange would decide the afternoon. Dragon stepped first. His attack was powerful, controlled, and direct. Bruce didn't meet it head-on. He shifted his angle. His lead foot moved just outside Dragon's line. His shoulders turned. Instead of throwing a heavy punch, Bruce redirected Dragon's momentum with precise timing. For a brief instant, the military champion lost his balance. Bruce followed with one clean strike to the center of Dragon's chest. Not wild, not brutal. Perfectly placed. Dragon staggered backward. He tried to reset. His feet answered a fraction too late. He dropped to one knee. The stadium fell silent. The referee stepped closer. "Can you continue?" Dragon looked up. His breathing was steady. His eyes were clear. After a long pause, he slowly stood. He wasn't injured, but he understood. Bruce hadn't defeated his strength. He had defeated his timing. The referee looked at both men. After seeing that Dragon could continue, he offered them the choice to resume. Dragon raised a hand. No. The crowd murmured in surprise. He walked toward Bruce Lee. For a moment, 45,000 people wondered what would happen next. Then Dragon extended his hand. Bruce accepted it without hesitation. "You were right," Dragon said quietly. "I believed power could answer every question." Bruce smiled. "Power is important. So is understanding. They become strongest when they work together." Dragon nodded. "I came here to prove that one way was greater than every other." He glanced around the stadium. "I leave knowing there is always something more to learn." The referee raised both men's hands. The audience responded with a standing ovation. Some had come expecting domination. Others had expected a miracle. Instead, they witnessed respect. As the noise echoed through the stadium, Bruce quietly stepped away from the celebration. He climbed down from the ring without posing for the cameras, without boasting, without claiming greatness. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty walkway. One of his students hurried after him. "Master Lee." "People will remember this day forever." Bruce looked toward the horizon. "I hope they remember the lesson." "More than the fight." "What lesson?" Bruce answered without turning around. "The strongest person in the room is not the one who refuses to learn. It's the one who never stops." He continued walking until he disappeared into the evening light. Behind him, the cheers of 45,000 people slowly faded into history. And for years afterward, those who claimed they had been there told the same story, not about a giant, not about a famous martial artist, but about the day two extraordinary men entered a ring with different beliefs, and left with the same respect. If this story made you think differently about discipline, courage, and the pursuit of mastery, then you've already discovered the heart of its message, because true strength is never measured by size alone. It is measured by the willingness to grow.